This is not a technical talk because I was on the red team for years, and that's where you start because it's easy. And I've been moving to the blue team, which is where life is more boring, but it's where all the work has to be done. And I'm trying to make it fun for my students with mixed results. The problem is, as you people probably know, the blue team is like trying to make people do what they need to do. So it's more about policy and rules and auditing and stuff like that. It just isn't very attractive. But anyway, the basic issue here is responsibilities that you hold when you have to secure something. And I thought there were two layers of this. One is I added the CISM certification to this class, which is what they need to become a security manager. And then I decided the current world of politics is certainly a very good place to look at these considerations. And I'm just trying to motivate debate, and I'm also trying to do something about the way everyone is jumping to conclusions. Unfortunately, as we all know, our society is greatly fractured, and all people seem to do, and anything to do with the government or policy now, is immediately look for a keyword in what you say to decide what team you're on, and then either love everything you say if you're on my team or hate everything you say if you're on the other team. I've got a couple of friends. One of my friends is way to the left, one of my friends is way to the right, and I'm constantly trying to get them to see each other. And the right-winger has a degree in psychology and is respectful to the left-winger. The left-winger is not at all, and never hears a word he says and just says, "You rotten bum, you hate everything," which is, it's not that simple. Anyway, so I teach at City College San Francisco, and I recently formed a corporation for reasons I'll explain here to do things outside the college. This stuff, probably you're familiar with it to some extent. We're in cyber war, which has been known since 2010, thanks to Google, because when China hacked Google, Google was mad enough to reveal this publicly, which had been an inside secret in the security industry for at least 5 years before this, that China is stealing everything from everybody. And of course, this had a lot of consequences, and the immediate consequence from a technical point of view, which I saw a few months later at Cornerstones of Trust here, is all the CEOs of all the companies went to McAfee and everybody else and said, "We paid you $100 grand to buy the latest firewalls, and China's hacking us. What's wrong with this picture?" And I was highly entertained to see that they just lied through their teeth. They said, "Within the next 6 months, we're going to have an AI firewall that can stop 0 days on the wire without signatures." And I was just amazed. And this is what happens when your technical people have got nothing, so your salespeople feel free to just run unhinged and make up lies, because of course they didn't have that. And the fact is, it took us all maybe 8 years to build up defenses against this, which is really a whole different philosophy of layered defenses and incident response and network monitoring and a whole lot of stuff, which I thought was impossible and sounded like science fiction, and now the best companies are doing it, and I'm teaching it. But anyway, so China hacked everybody, and primarily America, of course, because we have all the targets they want to steal. And by the way, if you want these slides, they're all at samsclass.info. Anyway, so they come in with the Lockheed Martin kill chain, and this is the new APT, of course. Instead of just smashing and grabbing something, they establish a permanent silent foothold so they can keep on stealing data forever. And they're very good at it. And so from America, now the number one aggressor in cyberspace is the US. Just like in every other dimension of warfare, we are the leaders, but we think about things from our point of view, so except for the civil liberties people, we don't regard our own government as the opponent. So anyway, the external opponents are China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia are the main opponents, and they have very different motivations and techniques. The Chinese are just trying to grow their economy, and they, not illogically, feel like stealing all the intellectual property is much faster than reinventing it. And from their point of view, this is not even immoral, because we have no right to patent important world products and hide them so they can't use them. They should just steal them, and that's what they do. So anyway, the Russians want to mess with us out of a sense of injured pride. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, they feel like very wounded that they're no longer dominant in the world like they used to be, and they believe in a zero-sum game, so they believe that anything that hurts us is to their benefit, and they just want to destabilize our society. So they push extreme candidates, not just Donald Trump, but also Bernie Sanders, correctly understanding that if either one of those people won, we would spend the next 4 years screaming and yelling and having a civil war inside our society over it. And I must say we're headed for it again. So that was them messing with us. Iran is very hard to understand what their motivations are, but they've been attacking a lot of stealing Game of Thrones and things like that. China just wants intellectual property, and North Korea just wants money. And they're doing enormous, they're funding their government primarily by stealing money from all the cryptocurrency exchanges, which are all pyramid schemes. I used to do pyramid scheme enforcement under contract with the Federal Trade Commission, and when I saw cryptocurrencies, I was just amazed. The same old thing I've seen before. Cryptocurrencies are just completely manipulated pyramid schemes. The Bitcoin price was totally fake, and you know, you might as well, it'd be a lot better to just go to Vegas or play the lottery. Anyway, and all financial professionals have the same complete contempt for cryptocurrencies. Although China just announced a week ago they're going to jump on cryptocurrencies, and my students who are Chinese, I think, have the correct analysis. The point is they are not going to make a public blockchain, they're going to make a private cryptocurrency, and the point of it is so they can control all the transactions in the economy and monitor them. All that sounds about right. Anyway, so we started it all with Stuxnet as far as physically destroying infrastructure to attack Iran, and then the Russians started attacking Ukraine. And they attacked because Ukraine is very network aware, so then more and more attacks came after that, up to NotPetya and WannaCry and all that. And here's the scorecard, different kinds of countries doing the attacks. The only countries that are able to do physical damage of cyber attacks are the US and Russia. And that's what got me more and more involved in international cybersecurity. So the Russians, here's their physical attacks. They attacked broadcasting equipment in France and brought it down, and then they attacked the Ukraine twice to bring down power systems. And these are physical damage, and they've certainly gotten much better because now they're doing it in Saudi Arabia. So there's a lot of these attacks. The Chinese have wave after wave after wave of attack because they have a gigantic technical debt to overcome. They have to catch up with us, and they're basically stealing a century worth of intellectual property as fast as they can and lying about it. But that's how they operate, and it's working quite well. So I mean, the only people in America are the ones that know they've been hacked by China, and the other ones just don't know they've been hacked by China. And the Russians have attacked primarily Estonia, but the United States, they attack not so much with direct cyber attacks, but just with propaganda. And the reason why everybody is so upset in the US Congress is that the Russians are much, much better at propaganda than we are. They're much better at dirty tricks and subtle things. The Iranian attacks are a little hard to understand, but there's certainly enough of them running around. And this is the one that got me involved. Really, they had recently the Russians hacked Saudi Arabia, and they hacked their major oil production facilities, and they turned off the security features to try to kill people. And they happened somehow to catch it before it took effect. But the end result is Saudi Arabia is very, very afraid, this and previous attacks, so they hired me to teach classes in Saudi Arabia, and I guess like many other people, I'm able to be politically incorrect. The InfoSec community in America will mostly not touch Saudi Arabia at all. In fact, some people that are working with me have told me I must keep secret their involvement with me because their company would fire them if they dared to do any business with Saudi Arabia.
But they're an ally, I thought.
What's that?
I thought Saudi Arabia is an ally of the U.S., even though there's some political stuff.
Yes, that's what they are on the friends list. I looked up the list because I looked up, they're on the same list with Japan and Canada. They're on our close allies list, but the cybersecurity community is primarily in lockstep with the American left, and they are very much into boycotting things and political correctness, and they feel like they would lose their business if they were perceived to do something that did not fit with the current Democratic agenda. This is why, I've always been a Democrat. I've never understood Republicans very much, but I cannot deny in the last several years the Democrats are in my way far more than the Republicans. But anyway, Saudi Arabia did ruthlessly kill a journalist, and then there's this lie about it. And the American Democrats very much want to hurt them, but the Trump administration has managed to utterly distract them from that, so they never got around to actually declaring sanctions. And this is where I sort of invite comments, because I'm doing something that some people regard as unethical here. There is a large movement to isolationism in America, where we should not have anything to do with China or Saudi Arabia or anybody else. We should just sit here on our moral high ground and sneer at all these people and only take their oil. And I don't agree with that. I think I like scientific exchange, and I'm working with these countries to some extent. And I've been in this place for a long time. In 2011, I was in a position of knowing underground stuff nobody else knew, not because I have any special skills, but because I read. And I read the anonymous dumps, which other people didn't read to the end. and I found OpenSQL injections inside the government of China. And I went on Twitter and announced, I found this stuff, and for a month or two I found all this high-profile stuff of all the major companies by just reading the anonymous dumps. And then I couldn't reach anybody responsible, so I went on Twitter. This is how I eventually ended up being condemned by attrition. And I said, I've got 4 OpenSQL injections inside the government of China in the same week when Obama just announced that if China attacks us with cyber weapons, we will respond with kinetic weapons and start a war. And I said, anybody could create that by using these SQL injections. So on Twitter, I managed to reach people, and I communicated through the United States State Department, and they warned China to fix that stuff, and they fixed it. And many people yelled at me at the time from the security community saying, we should be attacking China, you should give that to our government so we can punch China back, you shouldn't ever be helping fix vulnerabilities in China. And I said, I don't really feel that way. I feel like everybody should patch their vulnerabilities. I also told my college, who had a political campaign I didn't agree with, to fix their stuff. I said, no, you happen to be wrong, but you should at least patch your server. Anyway, to me, those are 2 different things. But a lot of people don't see it that way. They see total war. So anyway, DEF CON went to China. I've been at both DEF CON Chinas, the first one and the one that just finished. And I was surprised how little pushback there was from people saying it was immoral of us to go to China. But I had some weird experiences. When I first went to the first DEF CON China, they had a new thing called the Blue Team Village. They came and said, hey, we need another talk for the Blue Team Village. And I said, hey, I can teach cryptography. They said, oh, no, you can't. And I said, I can't? They said, no. Would Chinese get mad? No, but the US would get mad when you come back. And I said, they would? So I looked it up, and by George, it's true. There's this list of what nations we trust, and China is on the bad list because of all the software piracy, which is understandable. And in order to punish them, they have outlawed the teaching of cryptography in China. So if I did that, I would be violating US export restrictions. Even though, of course, I don't know any classified cryptography, I don't even know any advanced stuff. I teach ordinary stuff like RSA and AES. It's not like they don't already know that. But anyway, I'd be violating US export restrictions, so I couldn't teach my cryptography class in China. So instead, I taught exploit development and reverse engineering, which is legal to teach in China. And you know, I don't quite understand the logic of this, but that's what I did. Anyway, so, by the way, I'll tell you one thing I hadn't anticipated, which is, of course, everything in Google is blocked in China, so you can't teach Android apps very well at all, and I had a plan to get around that totally didn't work. So after about an hour of trying to make this work, I said, well, forget it, we're going to do Splunk instead. Anyway, so they took it pretty well. Anyway, but the Chinese scored higher than anybody on my CTFs. They really know their math, they're really diligent. They were ready to learn stuff, you know. Anyway, so I started a company to do this stuff because I have to get outside the college system for this, because the college has always got a very low level of performance, and they're in the way, and they're always running out of money. And we have a bunch of new teachers that are very smart, and they can't even get a living wage from the college, so I started a private company, and we're getting more of these contracts. And since I run the company, I can do politically incorrect things because I don't care. Anyway, so we got in Black Hat. We had Black Hat in Vegas, and we just got approved for Black Hat Asia, and there's a lot of these things. So this should be growing, and it's a good start. And this one is in Singapore, and I looked on the list again. In Singapore, we're friends with. Like Saudi Arabia, I can teach anything I want over there, although I can't quite teach anything I want in China. And so I went to Sri Lanka. They brought me in there, and it was interesting. And I've had a lot of really smart people there, and a huge explosion of internet and cybersecurity community growing. And they bring in somebody every year to be at a big event. And I met the head of the army and stuff like that. They make a big deal of the visiting American big shot, you know. So anyway, I'm reading books about this, talking about the modern world, try to get people interested in this. So Russia's been attacking us like crazy, and they use not so much cyber attacks as straight up physical attacks, and Russia is very, very, very aware of the appearance of what they do and the political consequences, so they do really rotten things like poison people in the heart of London with dangerous things which will hurt other people, which could not have come from anyone but Russia to put their signature on it. This is like the Mexican cartels. They don't just kill somebody, they hang them upside down from a bridge with a sign on them so everybody knows exactly who did it and exactly why it happened, so you get the message, don't mess with us. And they're pointing out that anybody that opposes Putin, even if they flee to another country, they will be killed publicly, an example will be made of them, and the British did nothing about it. And now Putin has stolen 50% of the entire GDP of Russia, it's the king of kleptocracy, and he has exported most of it to Britain. and a large part of the rest to America. And this is where the Russian kleptocrats have stolen their money and gone, and that's why the UK could really hurt them if they made them unable to spend their money investing in expensive houses in London, but they don't want to lose that money, so instead they just sort of whine about it and let them get away with it, like we do. Of course, here, we cannot figure out what to do with the Russians at all, so Hillary Clinton tried to give them a reset button and say, we'll forgive you for everything we did in the past, and this feeling that you're going to shape up, which they totally are not. And Donald Trump is still fixated on relitigating the 2016 election, which is just amazing. But you know, if you have $1 billion and you're the president of the United States, you could just turn off the television and do whatever you want. But he can't do that. He still hurts him that people say he didn't really fairly win the 2016 election. I would think you wouldn't care. You won, so let it go. But he can't let it go, and so you can't admit the truth that the Russians influenced that election. He doesn't want to hear it, so he can't admit that the Russians are doing anything. He has to pretend that the Democrats in Estonia are doing it, which is all nonsense. And you get people like Mitch McConnell that has to block all election security measures for the same reason, because any attempt to improve American election security is seen as disloyalty to the president. Now, I think the best preparation for both the United States government and my college is to watch the Game of Thrones. When you have completely unqualified people who have no idea what they're doing running your government, they spend all their time conspiring against each other and stabbing each other in the back and believing mythology about each other, and that's where we're at. We have a mad king who believes complete nonsense, and we have a bunch of sycophants around him that all hate his guts and are waiting to stab him in the back and kill him, but he remains popular with his base, so they can't do it. And that's why Trump has been trying to drag down Pence with him, because Pence would pull a Brutus and stab him in the back at any moment, and he's trying to make sure that Pence knows we're both going down together, which is the survival strategy in a completely corrupt government, which is what we're at. Anyway, so U.S. made Stuxnet, and it was very interesting. I remember I was on an airplane to a conference like this when Stuxnet hit, and I got it working on the plane, and I got there, I said, forget my talk, we're going to do this. It was bloody awesome. Plug in the USB stick in your own just from having the window pop up. It was very interesting. And another article that I read, which changed me greatly, is I read this article about malware analysis. In 2010, analyzing viruses was such a rare skill that the Russian mob found it efficient to individually destroy the people who were analyzing the viruses in order to keep the viruses going. So they would take a virus researcher, kidnap his daughter, get her drugged up and sell her into prostitution, and then send him a note saying, if you want to save the rest of your children, you'll stop exposing our viruses. And the lesson I got from that is an economic one. There were so few people with the skills to do malware analysis at this time that was the most efficient business model. So if we can spread the knowledge of malware analysis out to a greater group of people, it will no longer be possible to just kill them one by one, and they'll have to use other techniques. So I decided to start teaching malware analysis. And this book came out from Kevin Mandian and his gang of Mandian, and it's very good, and I've been teaching it for a while, and now it is very common to know how to do malware analysis, and therefore the mob can no longer just kill the researchers one by one. They have to actually write better viruses or use some less violent technique to get where they're going. So then I started teaching instant response, which is the whole discipline invented by Mandiant to deal with the Chinese threat, and it's very interesting stuff. And of course, exploit development is good, clean, fun, leak stuff, and network security monitoring and Splunk and stuff goes along with it. So I've been slowly catching up, like academia always is, 5 or 10 years behind real industry, beginning to teach people the skills of modern network defenses. But all this moves me in the world of the blue team, which is just not as much fun any way you cut it, but it's got to be done. Anyway, so there was a very interesting debate here from a guy whose book I got later, talking about what's going on with the U.S. and China battles. And when I was a kid, my parents just said the Democrats are right and the Republicans are wrong, but it's unfortunately not that simple. This reminds me of another thing that was simple. 10 years ago, everyone said Linux is secure and Windows is not secure. And again, ever since 2014, with Heartbleed, all the people that say that are still crying in the corner, and they haven't dared to show their face. Because if you just paid for your software, you'd be fine. It was Linux that got hacked. And then it happened over and over and over until it turns out, as anybody should have told you, life is not that simple. It is up to the skill of the administrator. A skilled Windows administrator can make a secure server, and a skilled Linux administrator can make a secure server, and if you're sloppy, both of them are garbage. And unfortunately, it's not so simple as the Democrats are good and the Republicans are bad. So Michael Pillsbury is a guy who knows a lot about China and wrote a book called The 100-Year Marathon. And he's very, very concerned that China is just fooling us, because China has been on a 100-year development technique since before Mao. They've been trying to improve the life of their people, and they found out that when they act sort of helpless and backwards, they get a lot of aid, but they dared to threaten Russia, and Russia cut them off, and they said, we are not going to make the same mistake with America. We're going to always act behind and helpless and keep them lulled into a false sense of security. But the hardliners, I don't know how powerful they are in China, but his claim is that the hardliners in China do intend to replace America and dominate it, because there can only be one sun in the sky. But I don't know if they'll necessarily win. I think just like the United States, they got hardliners and moderates, and the moderates just want us all to get along and trade, and the hardliners think there's an inevitable battle and we have to position ourselves and win. And so I don't know what's going to come of it all. But anyway, they had a very interesting debate here. And so the idea is that China will never clean up their act, they'll never become an open liberal state. They are just pretending that and lying about it, and just letting them steal everything from us, and responding not by punishing them, but by just giving them more aid because we're sorry for them, is just giving them more and more ability to get ahead of us and have an advantage in the inevitable conflict. And the con, of course, is the one I'd like to believe, that our economies are totally mixed, that the Chinese are coming here, the Americans are going there, and neither of us want to tear down the other country. We're both going to share the world peacefully in a glorious future. That would be nice. I'm not sure history is on the side. But anyway, China is the issue of our time. Every American company has to either expand to China, or they just have to accept being a second-rate company forever, because China is a huge market. And if you don't go to China, then who are you fooling? You're irrelevant. You're not really willing to be the leader in your field if you're not going to go to China. And so Trump, as usual, I knew a teacher like him, he always has to say the one thing you should never say, so he congratulated the president of Taiwan, which is like a total violation of something he's been held between the United States and China for 50 years. But as a lot of the crazy things Trump did, it actually exposed a dirty secret, which is, in fact, China doesn't really care. They said they would freak out and do something horrible. When he did it, they didn't. And so he acknowledged Taiwan, and they got mad, but they noticed what everybody else noticed, is that there's no way to shut up Trump no matter how much you yell at him, so you might as well just put up with it and carry on. There are people, certainly China is not slowing down their attacks against us at all. They're developing anti-satellite weapons, they're building artificial islands and militarizing them. They are hacking American businesses like crazy, and every time you complain, they just lie and say, oh no, we're not doing that. Now, they used to openly do it without even concealing their IP addresses, right from the military IP addresses, as if, like the Russians, they wanted us to know they were doing it. And what they have done is get a little more sneaky about it. So we can pretend a little bit that it's not happening, but they haven't slowed down at all for very good economic reasons. They have an awful lot of economic catching up to do, and this is how they're doing it, by stealing our stuff. So anyway, the pro people here say, I'm really glad Trump is finally taking a hard line against China, because Obama was nowhere on this. And even though Trump is kind of nuts, at least he's on the right side of this issue. And there's several issues he's on the right side of, much though it might pain me to say that. And that's the way it is. It's not so simple as the Democrats are right. Uh-oh, I'm out of power. Let me figure out where my power brick is. There it is. All right. Probably a power strip. Great, okay, good. Thank you. Good. So anyway, they've been talking about this, and even the Republicans say if Trump happens to be right about China, but I wish he wasn't so nuts. And we might think that Trump's hard line against China will lead to benefits when another president goes in who could actually successfully make some good out of this. We'll see what happens from this. And on the left, they say that we should not be picking on China. We should instead be investing in our own research and developing more stuff. And they may have a point there too. I don't claim to know the answer. They also say something I definitely agree with, which is the immigrants do all the work. I certainly know this. American, after a couple generations here, they get fat and lazy and don't bother to learn their math, and they don't do well in my CTFs. It's the immigrants that do all the work and bring in all the energy. So choking off the flow of immigrants is highly questionable. But anyway, alienating our allies, isolating our nation, this is the path we're on under Trump for some reason, and except for Russia, which is suddenly wonderful. It's amazing to me how the Republicans now love Russia. It just shows that they will just go along with the leader. They're following the leader like a guy with the big horns, do whatever he says. Anyway, it's that's where we are. So when I went to Sri Lanka, I told them that I read this book, and they said that soon China is going to be the #1 world power, and the United States will be second. And he said, I think it's already that way. That's the way it looks from here. We have abandoned the field to Russia and China. Just let them take over the world and pretend it'll be perfectly fine and nothing bad will happen. That's where we're at. And China is vigorously expanding. Because if you're a small country, you have to either be united with America or China, or you'll get squashed like a bug. And they're now going to China, of course, since we aren't interested in being allies with anybody. So anyway, and the Chinese can't figure us out. The Chinese are very disciplined. Their government made a 100-year plan. They are very careful in messaging. They choose every word carefully. They plan everything very carefully, and dealing with a lunatic like Trump that just spouts off everything like a baby, they try to look deeply into what he says and what does he mean, and there is no pattern. It's just nonsense, and he contradicts himself, and they can't figure out what the deal is. What's his problem with Huawei? What's he think about Hong Kong? Nobody knows what we're doing over here, and you can't figure him out by looking for a deep meaning of it all in a conspiracy. Although I must say, some of the Trump supporters I know have told me.
I can shed a little bit of light on that.
What's that?
So I can shed a little bit of light on that. So with the onset of 5G, you know, there's this race between countries, between North Korea, China, the United States, to actually be the first to roll out 5G.
Yeah.
Right. So we have our trials going on in 20 cities right now, but it'll take years to roll it out. But whoever gets to that first full 5G rollout it's going to be like they're going to be seen as the superpower of the world. Right?
I think it's Huawei.
And that's what's happening between the countries, and so it's going to actually create a lot of political unrest between countries, because what's happening in 5G is we're going to be hyper-converged to the world through cell phones. And that is why the countries are racing to get there and be the superpower first. And so the reason why Huawei is a threat is because in China, they're pushing a lot of business through Huawei, right? They're out here in our area locally, but they have some poor business dealings, right, with their subcontractors in there. And so they've sort of been ousted, and they are seen as a threat now to us in the United States.
Well, there's certainly an economic threat, and that they compete with us.
Because Google, you know, different companies are here locally are not going to do business with Huawei, and they are blacklisted right now.
Yeah, now they can't.
So that's a little bit of the background.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, so I can put it together.
Well, this is good, you know.
Yeah.
This is what I'm hoping to do in my class, is motivate interesting opinions. Anyway, they can't figure out what to make of Trump in Beijing, which we can't figure out what to make of him here either, most of us. And we basically have a mad king doing weird stuff, believing weird conspiracy theories, changing his mind every few minutes, contradicting people. And I don't say, my right-winger friends say, Trump has a master plan. It's all a scam. Like I said, Giuliani seems to be a bumbling fool. They said, oh, no, he just wants you to think that. And I said, well, it's working. But anyway. But of course, you can't just prove that. Maybe this is all a carefully planned scam to pretend to be the Three Stooges in public while some master plan germinates behind the scenes. I don't know.
So one other thing I just want to mention, so when we become hyper-converged to the world, what that means is when we're going to have fast speeds. You know, what takes you 6 minutes to download software today will take like 6 seconds. It's supposed to be 20 times faster, lower latency, greater bandwidth. And there's a number of other things, you know, involved with 5G. And so the amount of applications that are going to scale, you know, and how we're going to take machine learning and really how, you know, play into all these numbers that everybody talks about, and how we're understaffed and we're going to see this upsurge in applications in the future. We really don't, we all really don't have any idea how understaffed we really are. And this is why we have to embrace women and other groups, everyone, because we have to become our own force to basically support what it is that's going to be coming at us. Because the applications are just going to take off. And so your jobs are going to be really become more important than what you guys do and how you support this. So anyway, so that's a little bit of the background. Sorry to take
No, that's fine. Okay. Anyway, there's fun stuff like Grindr. The Chinese bought Grindr. Don't ask me why. The gay dating site. And then everyone freaked out that now they know who's gay in America and they can blackmail them, so they sold it back. So, we're mingling our economy with China in strange ways. And this one I thought was very interesting. I think getting to the heart of what Democrats feel like these days, what's happening to our government. And this guy, Larry Diamond from Stanford, said, here's what causes governments to fail. And this is what was said when they formed the American Constitution. They said the problem, in the grand history of the human race, democracies are not normal. If you look at the human race the way we look at animals, we say like swans mate for life, other animals like monkeys don't, and they just switch. They've said natural state of America, of humans, is a monarchy with a king, and they follow the king, and the king passes it on to his son. Hereditary monarchy is the natural state of the human race. And democracy is a rare aberration when a different system holds briefly, and then it collapses due to its enormous instability. That's certainly what happened in Athens, and I think it's what happens here. The point is, if you let the people elect their king, then sooner or later they will elect a king who tears down democracy. And Trump is absolutely doing this, and people love him for it. His supporters are more loyal than ever. This is what they wanted, was him to jail his political opponents, delegitimize the election, and just claim the kingship. It's the natural end of democracies, and it may be the end of us, although it's looking like it won't be, just because I think Pompeo said this, he's just so incompetent he can't do it. We're saved not by his good intention, but by his extreme incompetence. Anyway, so here's what you get: corruption, scandals, abuse of power. And when your government no longer provides jobs and money, then of course it comes down. And of course the stock market's still going up, which is probably why Trump supporters really support him, I suspect. But anyway, you need a certain amount of social capital for a democracy. You need people to actually love their government. They need to actually respect one another and feel like we should all vote. And until now, I've seen that the amazing thing to me in America is that we don't have civil wars and coups more often. People get very, very angry at the government, and they decide to run a candidate to go get votes. They don't decide to take a shotgun and have a war and tear it down by force, which is what they do in other countries. And I don't know why the American belief in our system is so strong that people don't rebel against it. That ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. The system prevents a lot of violence because everyone believes in it. So if you look at the corruption index, countries of the world are rated here in corruption. The United States is not that high anymore. We used to be, I think, but anyway, UK is above us, and of course Russia and North Korea are way down towards the bottom. But they do rate them on the perception of corruption, and it's interesting to see. And of course, you can't have a democracy if the corruption rises to a certain point where people are just rigging the election. Democracy has been growing worldwide. It grew greatly in the 80s and 90s when we had a large mission to go out in the world and promote democracy and hold up countries. And in this millennium, we have pretty much cooled it off, and democracy has stopped growing and begun to decline. So it is something to worry about. And here's the Larry Diamond 12-step program, delegitimizing your political opposition. See, I thought Trump was not doing this because he had all the chance of lock her up, and then he didn't lock up Hillary. But now with the Ukraine scandal, it has come out that he absolutely does want to delegitimize and investigate and jail his political opponents like other tyrants, which is absolutely the worst thing that can happen. If your king gets in and jails the opponents and kills them, then you're in forever, and that is totally what he's trying to do. He's just so fantastically incompetent that he can't do it properly or conceal it properly. It reminds me of my college administrators. A few months ago, there's a huge budget crisis at my college. They fired the teachers, they cut the classes, and about 2 months ago, the administrators had a brilliant idea of doubling their own salary, which really didn't look so good when it hit the paper. And I was just watching. These are people that are so incompetent, they can't even figure out how to launder money. There were ways to move more money their way with it being less obvious, and there are certainly ways for Trump to do this without being so obvious and getting caught, but he's too incompetent to do it. Anyway, attack the courts, attack the media, limit the internet, and so on. These are the steps you do to turn a democracy back into the natural state of a government that hasn't tried to be something better, which is a hereditary monarchy. So Trump certainly talked about all these things. Everybody that opposes him is a traitor. Every news article that repeats, say, what he said last week and makes it sound bad is a lie. All the news is fake, and so on. It's really pretty remarkable. And I'm watching the polarization. The Republican Party went way to the right over the last decade or so to where they have gone more openly than ever to the party of white supremacy and just believing false mythologies and making things up, although they tried to resist that. You know, Bushes wanted to move away. This was Nixon. Nixon started the Republicans on the path of white supremacy with the Southern strategy. And it worked for a while, but the Bushes figured out from demographics that they cannot possibly survive without the Hispanic vote, and they have to knock it off. And the Bushes learned Spanish and gave speeches in Spanish and said we're going to be the kinder, gentler Republicans, but Trump put them back on the old path of just blaming Mexicans for everything, closing the borders and such. So that's where we're at. And the thing that is not, I think, entirely recognized until recently is that the Democrats have done exactly the same thing in reverse. I mean, now we've got Elizabeth Warren, who wants to start a health plan that she cannot possibly pay for it. She has tax rates that go over 100% for people on the top, and it still only produces 1/3 of the money she needs. So she's just lying about the money she needs. It is just like Trump. The left has let themselves get driven nuts by reaction to the right, and you know, it's just as the society is splitting into two groups, both of which are completely nuts, screaming at each other. And I saw an article recently in the New York Times that said 80% of Americans are actually in the exhausted majority, where they're in the middle and they wish these people would just knock it off. But we don't have very many candidates in the middle. The candidates are all way on one side or the other, and I don't think the cure for Trump is to put in a radical restructuring in society right away, the other way. I think you'll just have another backlash. This is sort of a flywheel that gets more and more crazy until it breaks, I would think. Anyway, so the Russians, but you can understand why the Russians did this. If you take a look at a chart that's come out later, you can see the Russians were, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, they were persuaded to imitate the American economic system. And it was a complete disaster because their corruption level was too high, so they created a crisis of economy that was 4 times worse and 4 times longer than the United States Great Depression from 29. And out of this incredible misery, they elected Putin, who said he was going to make Russia great again and bring back the USSR. And from their point of view, this is a big step forward. Things were a lot better under the USSR than under this supposed free market Americanized system that was horrible. And that's led them to here. So China wants to weaken our alliances in order to spread their influence around the world. And the U.S. just wants to pretend that it's perfectly fine to back up and put up walls and hide in our own country and let the other countries have the whole world and fight over it because it's all worthless anyway, which I think is not that much true. And I was impressed by the kleptocracy. This really got my attention and had me, I was honestly inclined to promote Bernie and Warren until her tax plan came out, and it became clear that she's just lying. But the general fact is true that the economy of the United States has undergone incredible restructuring. Here's the tax plan in 1950, going up to 70% tax for people with the highest income. And then there came the Reagan Revolution that cut this down by half, so the rich people only pay half as much tax. And then came the Trump tax plan that took it down, so rich people now pay less tax than poor people. And this is not just a restructuring of wealth in America, this is kleptocracy. That wealth goes to the richest people who then donate it back to Trump. This is what Putin did. It is a form of money laundering where you cut the taxes on the rich so they will be rich, they then kick it back to you in the form of political campaign contributions and contracts for hotels and stuff, and you yourself get a lot of it. It is robbing the public coffers and putting it in your pocket, and people are cheering for it, and he wants to do it again, although I don't know how much lower he can take it. And his supporters are still on board with all this, so it is certainly true what Bernie and Warren say, that there's a monumental error being made in the American economy, and you need something like much more tax on the rich to correct it. Anyway, so this reminds me of their global warming. I mean, here's a picture of the ice caps, and a few decades later, they're chewed away by that much, and yet here's the global average temperature rising. The highest, every year is always the hottest temperature on record. It's been that way for years. The CO2, for almost a million years, is up in a place it's never been, and Trump loves coal. Perfectly fine, it's all just a Russian hoax, none of it's happening, and his supporters are all fine with this too. It is very interesting, and I thought the analysis was clear. I thought Trump was like Nixon, except without the tapes. But then he released the transcripts, generally admitting what he did. So he had the tapes too. So I wonder, what's the deal now? The deal is he's got Fox News. Fox News has his supporters hypnotized. They publish complete lies, and his supporters believe it. It's extremely effective, and it has led a large portion of America to drift off into crazy land and not be aware of it. And it's an interesting media. And I know what the Democrats want to do now is censor political speech on Twitter and Facebook. And what the Republicans want to do is censor political speech on Twitter and Facebook. And apparently we're going to censor the contents where the government is going to remove political speech from the internet to fix this. And I think that is not a fix at all. I think the fix is people need to stop trusting what they see on the internet. But that's an old-fashioned solution. Anyway, Larry Diamond wants us to start supporting democracies again, helping democratic revolutions, helping countries become more democratic with foreign aid and such. And that was the old model we used to have before Trump, and maybe it'll come back. I don't know. But anyway, this, what I've been telling you, is pretty negative, horrible stuff, and I want to end with something that always irritates my friends. I got friends on the right and friends on the left. And I keep trying to get the friends on the left to stop hating the ones on the right and see that they have virtues too. But one thing a lot of people would feel like is the whole world is going to hell, we're all doomed, the ice caps are melting, our politicians are nuts. And this book is the cure. It is not true that the world is getting worse. I've got a little poll for you. So I've got it up in one of my other windows here. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. All right, so this is Kahoot. And if you have a cell phone or a computer or something, you should go here. Let me start this thing. I don't want to do that. All right. And I should have glorious music. There you are. So go to Kahoot.it. These things are a hit. I learned this from the Air Force Cyber Patriot for high school students. Go there and give yourself a name and join in. I've got a few questions. If you read that book, you'll get them right. Anyway. There we are, some people appearing. It's fun to hack this thing too. I've got a red teamer student she wrote a script that makes like 1,000 of these and then answers every question in the speed of light. So one of them will certainly get every question right, so she always wins, and I said, that's the way. Now she's working at NASA. Before that, Verizon. She's the world's most deadly red teamer on our team, and she was not in security at all. She was in child development. Until our cybersecurity team was led by a woman, and then she came out, a bunch of these women appeared out of nowhere and joined the team, and some of them are bloody awesome. And somehow having nothing but male teachers made them feel unwelcome. That's what our diversity agent said. She said, you've got to have a role model up here, and she was right. I thought me saying I want women would help, and that didn't help. What helped is putting a woman up there. Suddenly only awesome people appeared, and then, well, I learned something. Anyway, I'm glad she's running the team. She's winning all kinds of trophies and stuff. She's a lot better than I was at it. Anyway. All right, I'll wait a few more seconds to see if we got any more. That's a pretty good short turnout. I guess it'll do. All right, so the first thing is the internet making the world better? What do you think? Okay, this one's just to see if you guys can operate the app, really. So I have no reason to believe any one answer is right. I like the most popular answer, but I would think anybody at a conference like this is probably pretty wedded to technology. But anyway, I think most of our government leaders are definitely in category 2. They think we need to break up Facebook and tell and remove all the objectionable stuff from the internet, although they can't really define what it is, which is why I have some sympathy with Mark Zuckerberg that says, dude, you got to tell me what to block if you want me to block something. They said, oh, just block everything bad. He said, no, I can't do that. Anyway, all right, next 3 are from that book, and they really are right answers. So, how many children will there be in 2100? Okay, this is the point. Very few people get it right. There used to be a book called Silent Spring in the 60s saying population increasing, we're all going to die. And China freaked out and had this one-child policy to try to stop this. And the fact is, a different thing happened. When you move people out of abject poverty, and they actually have some choice in their life, and when women get some rights, and they're not just property owned by men, they don't want to have 10 kids anymore. They spontaneously knock it off and get down to like 2 kids per family. You don't need to force them to do that. If the kids would actually live, and the parents could actually get birth control, they wouldn't have these giant families anymore. It's happening without any need for some draconian, terrible measure to make it happen. The population is going to stop growing and knock it off. Anyway, there's another one.
What was the right answer on that?
2, the lowest number. What's the worldwide average life expectancy? Today. It is 70. Most people are getting that right, which is better than I would have expected. But that is, anyway, that's good. It is in fact very good. The whole world is up to 70 on average. And how about this one? What percentage of adults are literate? All right, and the answer is 80%. And see, this guy has a quiz consisting of about 6 of these questions, and the end result is every audience in the world does worse than chance, worse than a monkey on this quiz, because most people have an image of the world from like 1960, when the other nations were starving, they were desperate, they were dying of diseases, they had no food, no education, no nothing, and the world has improved since then, a lot. And that is the message of this book, which I highly recommend reading, especially if you're, if you're getting depressed. This book is by Hans Rosling. Hans Rosling was a UN expert, and he has a lot of things here. This is the income of the world since 1800 to now. The US is going up. Here's Russia. Here's World War I. Here's their attempt to imitate American democracy, which led to a tremendous economic disaster, which is why they put in Putin, who ended their free elections and made himself a monarch, but they don't care because they want some money, which we probably do the same thing. And I heard that that's why people are supporting Trump, because they're somehow suffering incredibly and living in abject poverty, although I don't see it in the data. But anyway, look at China though. This is why China has huge patriotic fervor. They are so happy, they are so proud of their country, they're sure they're on the right path. This is what everybody wants. Our kids are doing better than I did. Their kids are doing better than. This is the way countries want to be. They're rising so fast that they love their government. They love their country. They support them. They feel like we would, that they're on the right path and everything is good. So, I mean, you can understand a lot about the world just from these global trends. And a lot of other things are going up. New movies, women's right to vote are almost universal. People are protecting nature more than they ever have. Science, more new discoveries all the time. More people are literate than there ever have been. Democracy is going up, although there are dips, and we appear to be in one of the dips. The amount of food grown is going up. So in the grand scheme of things, education and technology is making the world better and better, but we are currently going through a relapse in America where crazy ideas come to the fore and we do counterproductive things for a while, and that is part of it. Humans don't, you take a look at a drug addict recovering, they don't just monotonically move better and better, they have relapses and crashes and then they come back. It's to be expected that there will be occasional steps back, but the general trend is getting better, so don't get too upset. But anyway, that's what I wanted to show you, and hope you find some use in that stuff. Yeah.
Will you be able to share at least some of those slides?
Oh, all the slides are up here. I'm glad you brought this up because I was on earlier, but people may not have seen it. If you go to samsclass.info, this is all public information, of course. If you just go to samsclass.info, let me bring up a browser that might work. Oh, there we go. Right at the top is this, and there's the slides. So if you want to look this up, it's all from those books. There, so the slides are there, anybody can have them, and all my stuff is free for anybody to use. A bunch of people go and give talks at conferences using my slides. It's perfectly fine. You can totally do anything you want with this. You can print it in a book, put your name on it, sell it, and keep the money. None of it matters. And that's up here. I even made that an official thing. I got a use policy someplace or other. Yeah.
Comments or what?
Yeah, I chose one of them and officially signed one of these things saying I release it to Creative Commons or something, so everybody can do anything with this. The only thing you can't do is commit a crime with it and expect me to save it. Yeah, right.
So my question is regarding that book.
Yeah.
How democracies fail.
Yeah, that's Larry Diamond.
Yeah, that got me a little bit depressed.
Yeah.
And I have my next generation as a biracial, so she is both American and Chinese.
Oh, yeah.
I want to
A lot of my
do
students,
whatever,
too.
yeah, whatever possible to avoid a war. But historically, though, I don't know. I mean, with 3 world wars for us, I'm just a little bit worried that
And there's the
Hawks of those
book,
countries,
Bill Williams, Larry Diamond, from
may do
Stanford.
something bad. But my question to come back on that, the How Democracy Fail book. I'm going to read it now, but I haven't.
Yeah.
Do they also study the North Scandinavian countries?
No, I don't think he did in this book, but he does quote a lot of other countries, and one thing he did is interview people in various countries to see how they feel about democracy, and he said, for example, people in African countries that are not democracies, like 80% want to be democracies. They all think democracy is good and they want to be that. The only people that don't care much are Americans. If you ask Americans, they've been asking, if you ask Americans, should the president really have to bother with laws and impeachment and all that nonsense? And a bunch of Americans say, no, the president should just have no power to do whatever he wants. And you say, should the military just be in charge? A lot of Americans are saying, yeah, sure, that would be fine. You know, we're moving to a place, and this is something, I've known immigrants that talked to me, came to America, and they said, you people don't appreciate what you have. It is so nice here, and it's so much better than where I came from, and you take it for granted, and you think it doesn't matter. It really matters to have a government that's not corrupt, and the cops are not corrupt. You can actually call the cops and they'll actually jail the bad guy instead of just taking a bribe from you and shooting your family. You don't understand what this place will turn into if you don't hold it up. And I think that is absolutely true. So, you know, I'd sort of like to see them kick Trump out of office, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think Democrats have nobody. And Trump supporters are perfectly happy. I thought they had been fooled by a bunch of lies, but that can't be true because by now they can see what he's doing and they love it. So they didn't get lied to about what he was going to do. They think this is what America should be. I don't happen to agree, but they do. Yeah.
My question is on, Mark Zuckerberg being in the news like in the last week. He was on Capitol Hill and he was talking about, he was introducing his Libra cryptocurrency.
Oh, yeah, Libra.
And, he's already under 30 years of FTC audits, and then he's, still having to prove himself, right? But of course the government sets the regulations, so they do need to tell him what he needs to be in line with. So I commend him for pushing the envelope forward, right, in in cryptocurrency ways. But I thought, wow, what timing? You know what I mean? And what are your thoughts on that?
Zuckerberg wants to be president. His haircut is an imitation of Augustus Caesar. He tells people he feels like he is Augustus Caesar and he should rule the world. And I read an article recently that said that the difference between him and Steve Jobs is he was smarter than Steve Jobs because Steve Jobs was pushed out of his own company. And I saw a commencement address by Steve Jobs. He was doing stupid things like making the Lisa that didn't work, so they pushed him out of Apple. And he said, he gave commencement address, he said, I thought my life was over. I thought it was the worst thing in my life, but in fact, it was the best thing for me. I was on the wrong track. I needed to start over, and so he made Pixar. He came back and then made the iPhone. It was a huge success. Zuckerberg has prevented himself from ever having such a learning curve by selling 2 kinds of stock. He has 51% of all the voting stock, and all the rest of the stock doesn't vote, so he can never be fired. So he's in the position of Trump after he got rid of Kelly. Kelly said, if you get rid of me, you're going to get impeached because there won't be anybody around here that can say no to you, and you'll just have sycophants that feed your worst impulses, and that's what Zuckerberg is. His way or the highway, so he can do any stupid thing he wants, like let people lie in political ads, openly admit this, and he's the ultimate judgment of everything. So, anyway, he wants to be president, and
He said that he wants to be president?
Oh, yeah, he wants to be president, and he Seems to me like he'd be the logical successor to Trump. He would keep going. I think in both cases, you got spoiled brats. Nobody ever dared say no. So they think they rule the world, and they'll just do whatever they want and totally ignore everything. And a lot of Americans appear to be on board with that. Of course, when the stock market goes down, then they'll turn against Trump and stab him in the back. But I don't think that's going to happen before the next election. Now, if Trump was smart, he would do what Nixon did, and he would artificially pump up the economy. All he has to do is wait 6 months and cancel the China sanctions, and the stock market will go up, and he'll ride in on a wave. That's why I don't know why he's wasting his time trying to relitigate the 2016 election. He is not a rational game player. He could totally win this by just manipulating the stock market with the tools he already has, but he's too crazy to do it. He's a very strange guy. I mean, it doesn't matter what happened in 2016. He won. Just forget it.
So I'd also be curious as to your opinion on, Dubai is one of the smart cities. They're going to be ahead of the world.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to be, in the next year, they're going to have they're going to be the model city, right, for smart cities, and they're going to, have everything on blockchain and be the first paperless society. And if that is the model, I think sometimes for myself, Zuckerberg would be the first person to actually help us follow suit with that, but with that comes issues, right? Security issues.
Well, Libra's not going to be a public blockchain. Libra's going to be a private business controlled by him. It's like what China's doing. It's not really a public cryptocurrency. It's a small group of people like Visa and MasterCard keeping it data on their private servers. Is basically what we already have, except it lies and pretends to be a cryptocurrency. That's why it's
Libra is a private currency.
yeah, the only people controlling it are Visa, MasterCard, Facebook, and a few other companies which are going to have the servers. You don't let the whole world in. So it's really what we already have. We already have Visa, a private database. A blockchain is a miraculous technology to make your computers run 1 million times slower. That's what it does. And now instead of doing calculation once on one machine, you do it on 1 million machines for no apparent reason. Now, by the way, there is an intelligent blockchain that I kind of like. I wonder if I can find it. There's a British one that actually uses sharding intelligently, and they were amazed when I promoted them. I said, they don't have a currency yet, but they have a blockchain that can scale. Because what you do is you only do part of the blockchain in each machine, and you only do basically your own transactions and a small number of others, so you do not need 1 million copies of everything, and you have something like 10 or 100 copies done on other machines, so you can't lie. But you don't need every machine to duplicate the whole chain the way Bitcoin does. That's why it consumes, like 10% of the world's energy or something ridiculous. Anyway, yeah,
Thank you.
I have seen your website before,
Yeah.
and there is tons of materials and training and stuff like that. I'm looking for something hands-on where you can start at some level and then build yourself. What would you recommend? I mean, there's so much, it's like hard to find a roadmap kind of.
Yeah, well, I'm just following the usual educational matter. So our beginning class is here, and I know teachers.
I already have a background in cybersecurity. I'm
Oh,
doing
good.
my master's in it.
Oh, that's good.
I
Well,
just want to try something more hands-on, like.
yeah. Well, you'll find hands-on projects here with basic security. Here's the more advanced hacking class. These are red team projects,
Okay.
and the others have a lot of blue team projects.
They start from setup and everything?
Yes, they do.
The files are
In fact, setup has become incredibly simple. I use the Google Cloud for everything. It's awesome. You can have 3 machines, and it doesn't matter what you have. You always have a web browser. I used to have people using VMware, and it's just sort of horrible and doesn't work, and it's not worth the bother.
Are there ways to get that for like free? Or?
Guys, if you get it for free, all you have to do is you enter a credit card number, and they never charge you. And every time, they give you $300 worth of credit for free, and when you use it up, you make a new Gmail account and reuse the same credit card and get another $300. I've done it about 12 times. And the reason is because Amazon owns this space with E2C, and Microsoft wants in with Azure, and Microsoft just landed the huge contract because Trump hates Bezos, so they're now going to be #1, and Google is way behind. So they give you a ton of free stuff trying to catch up, which is awesome for me and my students. And you don't even need an EDU email address or anything. Anybody with a bank account or a credit card can get all the free stuff you want from the Google Cloud, and that's what I do. So you can set up servers very easily, anywhere.
On your machine and all and everything?
Yeah, well, it's all running in the cloud. All you do is open a browser,
Yeah.
log into the Gmail account, and you can make free servers. So it's very nice. So 123 is where it starts, then 124, and then the advanced classes after that. And there's a lot of hands-on projects in each one of those, so check them out. All right. Anything else?
Awesome.
have one
Yeah.
comment from the discussion you guys were having
Yeah.
about Zuckerberg. So, I don't know, I'm looking at it as an outsider. It seems like when you commit a crime and you're rich, you go for elections.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the way it's always been, the rich are not subject to the law.
Yeah.
They can afford better lawyers and stuff, and in the old days, the king was
You go to
just,
jail, but if you're rich, you go for elections.
well, that's a huge, and to some extent, that's, yeah, and that's why the president cannot be punished for most normal crimes. You kind of can't avoid that. It used to be the king was specifically above the law. We can argue about it, but it certainly is absolutely not true that the law applies to everyone in America. It never has been, and it's not any better now, and it's not true in any other country either. The rich can get away with a lot more. I remember people got mad at Trump's lawyer saying he's just a fixer, and I thought about my lawyer. I've done a lot of vulnerability disclosure, and people come after me, and I got a lawyer, and he's a fixer. I said, dude, I told this company about their Bowne, now they're going to hurt me. Can you fix it and make it go away? That's what they do. If you can afford a lawyer, they save you. That's the way it is. And you can say it's a form of corruption, I don't know, but I think there's no ending in principle. But we would like to think there is some limit to the abuse of power the president can do, and that's what we're currently trying to find out. Is there in fact some limit? I think the answer is no, but we're going to find out. But it would be nice to think there is something you could do that was so egregious that you actually get thrown out of office. I think under the current climate, no, yeah.
I just want to, for people who feel a little bit depressed like me,
Yeah.
I have one angle to share, which is that so China is rising super fast because they are all unified. It's almost like a very effective, agile methodology being used versus over here it's waterfall for the political system. And so, however, there is one fatal issue with China's mechanism, which is every couple of 100 years, then there are maybe, because of the absolute power, corruption will go up absolutely. So after that cycle, it has to wait for an upheaval to reset itself. But I'm hoping that they can avoid that somehow by learning from the Western mechanism. But in the meantime, I think the Western mechanism has been too complacent. Also, it needs to use the business side logic and efficiency into the whole society.
Yes, when I read the book, The 100-Year Marathon, talking about the Chinese system, they say they have a 100-year plan to improve their society, and I said, boy, I wish we had even a 10-year plan here. We're just chaos. And that's where they're strong. They actually made a plan. They control the government. They control the press. They tell people what job to get. They kicked all the cryptocurrencies out of the country for a while. They said, we're going to control society for a goal, to make it productive and good and take care of the people and not let them do every stupid thing to make money today. And I wish we had more of that. There's no planning here at all. It's just howling chaos. And that's productive of bright ideas, but it's not necessarily the wisest way to really gradually build to a better future. But that's what I would like to see. America and China, not war, but sort of merge. We need some of what they got, and they need some of what we got. That's why I like the peaceful future, where we just sort of cooperate and kind of blend into each other. And my students, when I went to China for the first time, my students said, daily life in China is just like here. We went to China, we met the guys that work at Baidu, and they showed us it was just like Google. I said, it's true, daily life is just the same, and I thought I'd be terrified by the surveillance and the cops and everything, and it's not scary at all. There are cops everywhere, and they're about 12 years old, they don't have any guns, they're just watching you, they don't know what to do. They put these metal detectors everywhere, it's totally fake. Every time you walk through it, it goes off, and they don't know what to do. It's security theater. Anyway, I know there's people being oppressed there, but they certainly weren't too scary what they did with us. Anyway, let me pass it on to you, next teacher.
One more question.
Oh, no, another question out there? I don't think there is another question.
That was pretty awesome.